Shalom, Kahalo Yahweh Bashim Yahushua Bashim Kodash. Double honors to the elder apostles of GMS, including the elders that came before them, that taught us this truth. And shalom and salutations to all the brothers that push the word of truth and in sincerity. All right, so I'm the brother Yahshua, and I ran across, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Yahushua, I ran across this video, some very, very, very important information for everybody. The elder brother Malcolm can do, 3 videos on this. The elder brother Kazaki Allah can do 3 or 4 videos on this information. All the elder apostles could do numerous videos on this information. Everybody in GMS should watch this. It's that important. All right. So I'm just gonna bring out a passage and maybe a couple of precepts at the end, but mainly I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna let all 17 minutes and 15 seconds of this play. All right, because it's that important. All right, it's going into everything. All right, so End Time Productions, June 8th, right? And it says, public has never heard this side of the story. I heard a story so unbelievable, it made me travel to Jekyll Island, Georgia to investigate it for myself. Now this goes into the what is it? The Federal Reserve and the banking system and everything. But what they're doing is they're pointing directly to Jake. They're pointing directly to the Northern Kingdom, and most likely the tribe of Reuben. Okay, that's what it's sounding like. Anyway, because of the area. But again, this video is super important. I guess it just came out yesterday. But the spirit of Yahweh Shem Yahushua put it right in my face, and now I did on the Elder Apostle Tahar's comment board. I did post it up there, so anybody who has a line to get this to the Elder Apostle, any one of them, you should get this to them. So I did the best that I could. I'll try the other Elder Apostles. I'll go into their comment section and try to get this. And the Most High is going to get it out there. Anyway, so this is, and bear with my voice, please. I'm going to read this down until I hit the point. This is Deuteronomy 7. And when the Lord thy power shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and have cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites. The Canaanites are mentioned in this video by name, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when the Lord thy power shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. We didn't do that. And that's how we fell at that particular time. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son, for they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods. This is what happened. Okay, and it's all stated. It all comes into focus by watching that video, that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you. All of this happened, and destroy thee suddenly. Now listen close. But thus shall ye deal with them. Ye shall destroy their altars. Okay? Not join them or make those same altars or sacrifice your children unto Molech, which is what these altars represent, and break down their images and cut down their groves and burn their graven images with fire. All right, we all know the next one, right? But this is the point, and this is what should have been done. When you watch this video, they're talking about an altar that needs to be destroyed. But instead, what does Esau do? He uses it to further his witchcraft and his, his enchantments and everything that they did with that monetary system, going into the dollar, and now it's a talisman, and there's a demon on every dollar, and so on and so forth, all right? So let's just watch it. Without further ado, let's watch this. And it's just crazy. It's just crazy. All right? So, End Times Production, the public has never heard this side of the story. All right, listen close to this. It's crazy.
I said, who would be crazy enough to build a house on top of a blood sacrifice altar? He said, well, Rockefeller was.
I'm here in Jekyll Island, Georgia, one of the most mysterious places in the country. Some call it the Bohemian Grove of the East Coast. This island also holds secrets that are key to unlocking why the world is the way it is today. Behind me is a place called Indian Mound, which is actually home to the Rockefellers, and I'm here investigating a mystery that most people have never heard before. This mystery has been shrouded in secrecy for almost 100 years.
Jekyll Island is where the Federal Reserve banking system was birthed and conceived. And at one time, when it was functioning in the 1900s up to the 20s and 30s, some say 1/3, some say 2/3 of the world's wealth would vacation on that island. Mm-hmm. It was the highest conglomeration of wealth in a single place very often anywhere in the world back in the turn of the century. So it just seems like a little island that's not anything significant at all now, but it's amazing to see the financial side of the history of that spot. And so I'm sitting there looking at some of the things that he's telling, just thinking about some of the things he's telling me. We went out, walked around, and he showed me some of the cottages that had been restored, and the club itself, and the tennis courts, and they had a pier where the boats would come up, and he's just kind of showing me the grounds, and then we go to the museum. And he's talking a lot about the financial stuff and the guys that built it, and each cottage was, marked and named. Some of them had been restored, some of them didn't exist anymore, but they had like a sign that this is where this one was, and that one was built by J.P. Morgan, that one was Rockefellers, and that one was they had each one of them named. Well, they're all kind of native names, and then they're all got some kind of plaque on who the financial mogul was that had built them, and they're not really elaborate, luxurious mansions. They're just simple cottages for the most part, which was kind of interesting to know that the richest people in the world built them, and they were very low-key and almost like a cabin in the woods instead of a luxurious house like you'd expect. And they all had Indian names. So I started asking him about the Indian history of the island, and he lit up. He just was like, that's what he really wanted to talk about, because he loved the Indian history. And so he takes me back to the museum, and he said, we got a lot of stuff on the Indians. He said this was actually like the government main community for a tribe of Indians that don't exist anymore. And that tribe was called the Timucus. And I said, well, that's interesting. My name's Tim. And anyway, I didn't know anything about the Timucus. I'm from Oklahoma. I've learned a lot of Native history, and I have some Native bloodline, but I did not know anything about the Timucus. So I just asked him, please tell me everything that you can tell me about them. There's something about the natives that I feel like I need to know. So he said, well, the Jekyll Island Club was actually built on top of everything that the Indians had. So they just kind of wiped the village out and built the club on top of it. So wherever the chief's house was, there was a cottage now. Wherever the council house was, there was now the Jekyll Island Hotel. And he said everything that's built and visible today is actually sitting right on top of something that was significant in the Indian village when it existed. So he said the fact that this whole place had to go into ruins and then be rebuilt and become an archaeological state park, he said it actually helped us identify the native history because the club itself had almost erased that. And so I said, well, let's look at the museum. I want to see some of the Indian stuff. So we're looking at arrowheads and spear tips and, just artifacts that they had found and pottery shards and things and seashells that they had had. And he showed me all this stuff in the museum. He showed me some fragments of a weapon that was like an unusual bow. And when I say unusual, I mean that it was like a double curved bow. And that was a very unusual shape of the bow for a native tribe. I had never seen that shape before with an American Indian tribe. And I've seen a lot of bows and arrows. So I asked him, I said, this seems unusual. I've not seen this before. In Oklahoma, every native tribe, the bows were like a single bow or just a single curve. I said, this is quite extraordinary, especially as far back as this tribe was. So he said, yeah, we found a lot of weapon-type artifacts that we've not seen with other tribes. And I said, well, how do you know these were Native Americans? Maybe they were from somewhere else. He said, oh, no. They were Virginia because they're well established along the Florida and Georgia coast, and he said we got a lot of stuff in 3 or 4 states about them, and they were quite prolific at one time. So he said, we know they're Native Americans. I said, well, all right, what else you got? He said, well, we got some skeletons. He said, you want to see the bones? And I said, well, yeah. That sounds, don't get to see a skeleton very often. I said, are they where we can actually see them, or are they buried? He said, no, they're visible. So they had a burial site that they had been very respectful for when they built the museum. When they found a burial site, they didn't move the bones. They left them where they were, and they just uncovered them to where they were visible, and then they built the museum on top of it. They did basically the same thing with the museum that the Jekyll Island guys had done with their houses. They put a piece of plexiglass over the burial site so you could see it, but they were still trying to respect where the bones were and not move them. And so I'm looking at 4 skeletons of the Timucua chiefs. And they knew they were chiefs just from different things that were buried with them. So all of a sudden I look and I realize, man, these guys are really tall. And I commented to the guy that, how tall are these guys? They look unusually large. And he said, yeah, they're all about 8 or 8.5 foot tall. I was like, well, that doesn't seem like a normal Native American, especially the tribes that I'm familiar with. He said all the Timucuas were unusually tall, even the women. He said we found other skeletons and parts of bones out in the grounds, and he said we've got pretty good evidence that nearly all of them were extraordinarily tall. And I said, well, how do you explain that in relation to other tribes on the Atlantic coast who were not? He said, I don't know. It is an unusual anomaly. He said, oh, by the way, I've got a painting that you might want to see. It's actually the copy of the original. We've got it under lock and key. So I got a painting that actually shows the Indians from a group of French colonists that came to the United States before it was the U.S. This was right after Columbus. He said that it was the first colony of French folks that came over to try to establish a colony on the coast. And he said they landed in Jekyll Island, and they had some interaction with these Indians, and then they got so appalled by what they saw and witnessed that they fled at night and ended up in San Augustine, Florida, and established that city. So I said, were they the Huguenots who were the French group that established San Augustine? He said, yes. I said, well, I'd like to see that painting. And so he pulled that out. I'm looking at it, and it shows the Indians in all their regalia, and they're dancing around and having some kind of ceremony, and it's got the fire, and it's a typical, either they're having a party or they're having a war scene, and it has some things with the weapons. So I said, gosh, this has got some weapons in it that clearly validates the archaeology that they found. And then I see an altar. And I'm going, I don't know of a Native American tribe anywhere in the country. I know some that had log houses or high places or worshiped, nature in some way, or had totem poles or that kind of stuff. But this one has a stone altar, and it looks a whole lot like the one that I had dealt with in the Middle East. And I'm looking at the picture, and I'm going, is this an altar? Is this stone like something they're sacrificing on? Because this guy's holding babies in his hands in this picture. He said, yeah, they're cutting those babies, they're hacking those babies up in that painting. And so when you look at the details, two of the shamans or chiefs are holding a baby up by the ankles, and they're whacking their heads off and spilling the blood on this altar. And I'm like, sir, I don't want to be disrespectful of your training and archaeological understanding and history, but I don't know of any native tribe that did what I'm seeing here, unless it was an act of war. And this is really, really unusual. And I've seen this type of scene with artifacts over in the Middle East. And I've seen...
Okay, I'm going to break right here. I didn't want to talk, but I have to say this. So what he's describing is what Jake was doing, right, when we went into the land of Canaan, right, and those abominations that we learned that sent the northern kingdom into the Assyrian captivity. And they continued to do that when they got over here, is what he's saying. He said, because he's going to name off some of the places that he's talking about in what he's calling the Middle East. And it's places where Jake was, including Israel. All right? He's going to name off our homelands and places that we've dwelt, including right here in America, where they were still doing this stuff. Okay? Sacrificing your children to Molech is what they were doing. And spilling the blood on the altar. Where did they learn it? He's going to say Canaanite. These are Canaanite practices, is what he's going to say. All right? And Molech, I believe it's Molech is a Canaanite god. All right? Going back into it.
Weapons like this over in the Middle East.
Back that up.
This type of scene with artifacts over in the Middle East. And I've seen weapons like this over in the Middle East. I said, are you sure this is Native Americans and not some kind of colony that came from over there? And he was convinced they were Native. And I said, well, I'd like to show you some things on a few websites that identify artifacts in the Middle East countries, and especially Egypt and Israel and Syria and Jordan area, and some of those spots where there's some of these ancient groups. And I said, this type of altar, this type of religious ceremony, and some of these weapons, I've seen them before over there. Well, he was quite interested in that because he loves Native American history, but he's starting to question, maybe I need to dig into this more. That was his comment. So I said, at that point, then I thought, I believe this is why I'm here. I needed to see this and hear about this. At this point, I'm not that concerned about the financial stuff anymore. I wanted to know where is this altar. And so I asked him. I said, "Can you take me to this altar? I often pray over these things, and it's very beneficial for the land and for the country and for the people. Can I go to this altar and see it?" He said, "I can take you to the altar, but you can't see it." And I said, "Why can't I see it? Is it buried?" He said, No, it's not buried, but it has a house built on top of it." I said, "Who would be crazy enough to build a house on top of a blood sacrifice altar?" He said, "Well, Rockefeller was." I just like, okay, can we go there? And he said, "Yeah, it's just a short walk. Come on." And we'd actually, had already walked by it. So he said, "I've got the keys." He said, "Normally nobody can go in. The way these things are set up, they're historical homes now. The state of Georgia owns the park. They lease it out to another group, the hotel, to run, but the houses are maintained on the National Historical Register, and they're part of the state park. So you can't go in any of them without a guided tour or permission, but you can go look in the windows and walk on the porches and walk all around them. And they're set up inside just like they were when they were actually being used back in the 20s and earlier. So we go over there, and he's got the keys. So we go into the house, and he takes me into the parlor, and he says, "Well, I know you're a praying guy, so you probably would like to have a little time to pray." He said, "You're standing right on top of the altar right now. This is the room that is built on top of it." He said, "I'm just going to go over here and sit down for a few minutes and read the newspaper, and I'll let you pray and do whatever you need to do." The room that they were sitting in when they drew up the entire legislation and plan to pass it that became the Federal Reserve Act. So this was the conception of the Federal Reserve banking system on the parlor, sitting on top of a blood sacrifice altar.
Where babies were sacrificed.
Yes. And so all of a sudden it's like, wow, no wonder our banking system has so much corruption in it, even when people want to do the right thing. The idea that it was conceived like this, I'm going, this is not just a bunch of wealthy guys that got away for a vacation and came up with a profitable business plan. This has got something diabolical, something occultic about it, something evil that's wrapped up with it.
Yeah.
So even if it had been a good idea and something beneficial for the country, which many would argue that it was, this demonic power must have gotten into it. That's what happens when an altar is not dealt with. That's what happens when God's people do not do spiritual warfare the way He tells us to. Then we all become subject to it, because they didn't just create a bank; they created a banking system that every one of us have become subject to. So think about this. You've got money that you receive as a ministry, or that when you earn, I'm sure you tithe and give offerings. On your money is idolatry. It's printed right on your money.
Canaanite altars on Jackal Island, human sacrifice, and giants. These are the reasons why I traveled to Jackal Island. I wanted to see if these things were real or if this was just a story. Unfortunately, my time at Jackal Island was met with a lot of closed doors. All the footage you've seen and that you're seeing now, I took, and I was able to get access inside of Indian Mound. However, I was not able to corroborate any of the stuff he was saying because nobody wanted to talk. Everybody I asked about this had no idea what I was talking about. So, I guess this investigation remains inconclusive. Did J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers actually come up with the idea for the Federal Reserve while sitting on top of a sacrificial altar? Who knows? But if true, it would make a lot of sense.
All right, so crazy. There's a wealth of information in that video. All right, so and if this sees the light of day, hopefully the elder apostle will do something on it because he gets so many more views. My 5 views with hopefully through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Shai, that everybody gets to see this and do, lessons and so forth. But anyway, I'm just going to get a couple of precepts on the way out, and then hopefully this will spread like wildfire because everybody needs to see and hear that information. You could do, 20 different lessons all in all different categories on it. Stand now. All right. Because if we would have went in and took down them Canaanites the way we were supposed to, we wouldn't have. When we came into the land of Israel. So this is Salaki. Isaiah 47 and Salaki. Start at 10. All right. Isaiah 47 and 10. For thou hast trusted in thy wickedness. Thou hast said, none seeth me. Thy wisdom and thy knowledge, it hath perverted thee. And thou hast said in thy heart, I am, and none else beside me. And you're mocking the Most High when you say that. These devils. Therefore shall evil come upon thee. Thou shalt not know from whence it riseth, and mischief shall fall upon thee. Thou shalt not be able to put it off, and desolation shall come upon thee suddenly, which thou shalt not know. Stand now with thine enchantments, and with the multitude of thy sorceries, wherein thou hast labored from thy youth. This goes back to the early 1900s. If so be, thou shalt be able to profit, if so be thou mayest prevail. Thou art wearied in the multitude of thy counsels. Let now the astrologers, the stargazer, the monthly prognosticators stand up and save thee from these things that shall come upon thee. What things? Your destruction. We're in the time of your destruction now. And you look back, 110 years ago, 120 years ago, you were still wearied in your enchantments, in your spells, and setting up wicked institutions like the Federal Reserve. All right? Let's get one more and I'll go ahead and close it. That was a pretty long video, but I thought that you should see it all. Very important. What is it? Numbers 35. And shame on Jake, Jake is over there being as wicked as he can possibly be. But here they are on top of putting plexiglass over the bones of Gad and Reuben so that you can, harness the wickedness that these niggas was over here doing and use it against us even further. All right, so it's Numbers 35 and 33. So ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. Defile not therefore the land which ye shall inhabit, wherein I dwell, for I, the Lord, dwell among the children of Israel. So the northern kingdom came over here with that wickedness and continued in it. And that was one of the reasons why, that they're still getting jacked up to this day. All right? They were supposed to, do what they were supposed to do in Canaan. All right? So they brought that shit over here. And then Esau was able to shed their blood right here. And now, in order to cleanse this place, it must be clean, dissolved, but your blood is going to spill on this land, right? Before it's clean, dissolved. All right? It's got to be cleansed. All right, so I'm going to end it right here. And again, I pray to Yahweh Shem Yahushai, Hashem Kodash, that this information gets out far and wide, because, I mean, this is confirmation that it's Jake. Jake is wicked as hell. You know, it explains a lot. All right. So with that, we hope that the elect were edified, you brothers and few sisters, and with that, I'm going to say shalom.